It's taken 5 years for Star Wars to remember one key thing that made The Mandalorian Season 1 so great. 5 years after The Mandalorian first premiered, Star Wars' new show, Star Wars: Skeleton Crew, has remembered what made The Mandalorian such a rousing success in the first place. Star Wars: Skeleton Crew did something not seen in the Star Wars corner of Disney Plus since the premiere of The Mandalorian in 2019. It told a story about a previously unknown group of characters in an uncharted part of the Star Wars galaxy. This is what made Skeleton Crew such an exciting prospect. Andor is a spin-off of Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Ahsoka is essentially a sequel to Star Wars Rebels, and both Ahsoka and The Mandalorian tie in heavily to Rebels and Star Wars, The Clone Wars, too. Even Skeleton Crew, with an entirely new group of characters, is loosely connected to the wider so-called Mandoverse because it is set during the New Republic era. And yet, despite this easily exploitable connection, Skeleton Crew and its finale did something Star Wars hasn't done in a long time. The Mandalorian was a major deal when it first premiered in 2019. Not only was it Star Wars' first ever live-action TV show, but it was also Disney Plus' flagship series. It needed to be a big enough event to draw in both old and new Star Wars fans from all corners of the galaxy and show them that Disney Plus was worth subscribing to. Clearly, The Mandalorian Season 1 succeeded. It became one of Star Wars' most beloved projects, spawning numerous spin-offs and endless merchandising opportunities. However, what made The Mandalorian so successful wasn't just the Star Wars brand attached to it. Lucasfilm was clever enough to produce a story that anybody, regardless of their previous history with Star Wars, could jump into. Sure, it drew from the previously underexplored canon lore of Mandalorian culture, including the Darksaber, but even there, it made its own rules. Din Djarin and Grogu formed a formidable, emotionally resonant duo, and though the show visited places like Tatooine, none of it truly tied back to the Skywalker saga or other Star Wars stories. This all changed when The Mandalorian Seasons 2 and 3 came along. Sure, you could argue that it was just a matter of time before Star Wars' wider lore came knocking on The Mandalorian's door, an inevitability due to Grogu's Force sensitivity and the remaining Mandalorians. However, The Mandalorian has, in some cases, taken that connection too far. Season 2 introduced Ahsoka Tano, Boba Fett, and Bo-Katan Kryze, all pivotal characters in the franchise. Luke Skywalker showed up in the finale. Suddenly, Din Djarin and Grogu became part of a much wider galaxy, and the show became a haven for previously established Star Wars lore rather than a pioneer of new lore. The Mandoverse shows have given audiences plenty of cameos. Some were great, some unnecessary. The Mandalorian Seasons 2 and 3 included Ahsoka, Boba, Bo-Katan, Luke, and even Star Wars Rebels Gara Zeb Orrelios. Ahsoka carried the Star Wars Rebels torch and reintroduced Sabine Wren, Hera Syndulla, Jason Syndulla, Ezra Bridger, and Grand Admiral Thrawn. Even Andor, a unique show in its own right due to its storytelling approach and subject matter, couldn't avoid including characters like freedom fighter Saw Gerrera or Senator Mon Mothma. None of these roles were mere cameos, per se, though Zeb had only a minor appearance in The Mandalorian Season 3, but still. Everything is connected to something. Star Wars: Skeleton Crew, on the other hand, managed to include just one recognizable cameo from the Mandoverse. The pirate Vane, who helped pirate King Gorian Shard invade Navarro in The Mandalorian Season 3, is now a player in Captain Silvo's pirate crew, too. However, it's important to note that Vane's presence had no bearing on the story as a whole. His role was the definition of an Easter egg. If you knew who he was, that's a fun bit of trivia, and if you didn't, it will have had no impact on your understanding or enjoyment of Skeleton Crew's story. Now, I won't deny that when, in Skeleton Crew Episode 8, the real good guys, the New Republic came to rescue at a tin, and a few X-Wings came flying in attack formation, I prepared myself to recognize some familiar faces. Zeb, Hera Syndulla, or perhaps Captain Carson Teva, who has shown his face in both The Mandalorian and Ahsoka. Instead, none of the X-Wing pilots looked familiar, and I can honestly say that I've never been so excited about not seeing an instantly recognizable character in a Star Wars finale before. Skeleton Crew may take place in the New Republic era, but the creators and writers made the right choice when they decided not to include any major New Republic-era cameos. Part of what makes Skeleton Crew so special and refreshing is that watching it is an entirely new experience for both veteran fans and those less well-versed in Star Wars myth. It's an Amblin adventure that happens to be set in the Star Wars galaxy, and while it takes full advantage of Star Wars' gorgeous and expansive world-building, it doesn't rely on it to sell itself. The characters, the locales, the narrative, and the mystery were all entertaining and enthralling enough on their own. Including any Mandalorian-era characters or storylines would have taken away from the experience of the finale, a brilliant finale in my humble opinion, and reduced it to yet another Mandoverse show, a piece of the puzzle leading up to the Mandalorian and Grogu and Dave Filoni's Mandalorian culmination movie. Now, Skeleton Crew has the chance to carve out its own legacy, both for its story and its characters. Will Vim join an unestablished rebellion squadron someday? Will the kids try to find out what happened to the legendary pirate Takranod? How will Tin cope now that the barrier is gone? There's so much left for Skeleton Crew to explore, and aside from making sure the New Republic timeline makes sense, it's only obligated to continue its own narrative. Now that Star Wars is more interconnected than ever before, Star Wars, Skeleton Crew's individual strength is a beautiful thing to behold.